And it's a simple, quick solution so that you feel like you're not overexposing the interior of your home. People that maybe now wear their shoes in their home, where are they going to leave all their shoes? Right now, our shoes are in our closets in our bedroom. Maybe there's things about how we store things, where we store things, and how we enter and exit our home that are going to start to evolve.
You know, real quick plug on the Witt House at Lake Nona. It also has circadian lights, which if you guys aren't familiar with that, it basically is set up on a GPS function so that as the sun moves around the house during the day, different parts of the house light up more or less to reduce that depression, sundowner effect in the afternoon. Very important on senior living facilities where they get sundowner syndrome. Now it becomes even more relevant with us spending so much time in our home that we didn't before. But anyway, Thomas, what are you seeing on the production, documentation BIM side?
Well, mainly thinking about this, I'm really in agreement with Rebecca's comments, but I think that from my standpoint, really having thoughtful designs and integrated designs and being able to visualize exactly what the end consumer product is going to be in the future is going to be really important moving forward. So I'm heavy on the virtual design capabilities, and also with the thought process of, rooms in a home. If you think about a house, every home has the same rooms. They're just located in different places. So I think going forward in the future, especially with the world the way it is, we're going to see a lot more transitional rooms where rooms are not necessarily specifically purpose for a specific function, but it could be this or that. And the systems with the home works to create multiple functions of rooms and spaces. And this can go down a couple of different tangents when we think about this, because you're really thinking about functionality of design and how, people are thinking about it now. And you're also thinking about, a big one is mechanical systems and how products and systems are working together to, create what we call a sustainable house or a healthy home. And I think that the integration up front is very critical, as it's always been in this industry, but the integration up front before products even touch the ground is very critical to understand exactly what is necessary to put a product together. And that also trickles down to help out the trade aspect of it, with knowledge being left out there, with people leaving this industry. And if we digitize things, collect, the data of how things are going together, we can reuse that data and make decisions, not only in design, but performance-based decisions that are driven off of data, opposed to things being done differently over and over again. But that's just kind of my initial thought process on this.
Thomas, not putting you on the spot, but I'm wondering, can you give us a specific example of integration of the mechanicals?
Yeah, so specifically, and really when it comes to performance, so an example of that, and this is a real life example for a project that I was working on in Waynesburg, Virginia. Our current, traditional way of going about a mechanical design is you get a design for a permitting process to get approved, which has a rating. And after that, typically, things can change in the field based off of what is actually constructed, and things change, which in essence alters the sustainability or performance of that system. So I've had multiple scenarios where I've been given a mechanical layout or design by the subcontractor or trade and integrated it in a model based off of structurally designed trusses and plumbing, and nothing works out. I'm talking over 9 to 20 clashes in a residential home in multiple cases. And if at the initial start of the design, everybody's thinking with the same goal in mind, and you can coordinate up front. So it's really the digital coordination is what I'm referring to. And if you have a collection of designs, so let's say you're a production builder and you built the same design 30 times in the country, You're doing the same thing over and over again. The majority of the time, the trades that are actually doing that work are doing it differently. So if you coordinate these things digitally first, you're basically grabbing this data off the shelf and reusing it over and over again.
Okay.
And you can tailor it no matter what area you're in based off of zoning and performance.
How about the rest of the group? What have you seen? What are you experiencing? What are you anticipating relative to health, wellness, well-being, and its impact over the near future?
I'll jump in there.
Okay.
I'm an architect and planner and work on residential scale work, community planning work, multifamily and single family. To me, it's some of the basics as they apply at different scales, whether it's the planning scale or the home design scale. It's a consideration for light and air. We're learning how the sunlight feeds our vitamin D. We all have a desire to be in that sunlight, and designing well-lit houses and not cutting every window to save a few more pennies becomes a value proposition in the sales cycle as well. It's about balancing that public and private realm. I'm wondering if it's going to challenge our open floor plan designs a little bit, as we're being challenged with all being in the same room and not having that private space. How does a home offer the public interaction, but also the privacy that's needed to be able to live the way we live now and the way we might live in the future? And then it's that balance of rest and activity, how we have interior spaces that give us the ability to have that rest, but how are we still connected to some maybe private outdoor spaces associated with our house? And then at a bigger scale, how does that house interact in the community to give us the ability to have that public interaction, that natural outlet, and those connections to the spaces and places that keep us healthy, both mentally and physically.
Louis, are you hearing that directly from your customers, or is that a kind of professional expert anticipation of what's to come?
Honestly, it's nothing new. We do work at the high-end custom residential level, all the way down to student housing and high-volume multifamily, and it's listening and paying attention to what you get to hear when you get to dive really deep and engage and interview people and what motivates them, and then what you see sell or lease and motivate people to move into a community. And it's pushing all that together into a professional opinion.
Thanks.
A couple of other thoughts, Rodney. This is Michael Dickens, partner with Ibicos, with an innovation business that works with big product manufacturers and also the biggest home builders, and then founded the Alliance to get this community of thinkers together. I think you'll see a lot more industrial design coming in now. If you think about it, the architect typically has to look at land plan, the aesthetics, the function of a house, the interior layouts, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot to think about. But when you get then to the subsystems, whether it be how you work at home, or if you've got some systems that's going to help you maybe become sterile in a room, you might have the virus or some illness for a week, you're getting into the realm now of an industrial designer, a product designer. And some builders I know of already, we heard this morning, someone had worked with IDEO. Well, that's a group like that. They're looking at human factors. They're looking at product solutions. Oops, I've lost you somewhere. And I think you're going to see more of that. So the architects working with product industrial designers. I think hard surfaces. I think people have been moving them to hard surfaces on the floors. Probably a lot more of that, the thoughts of carpet and what they can bring with, who knows where the kids were or the dog was, and how do you clean and let that be purer. I think you'll see a bit more of that. And then touching on what the other gentleman just said about systems integration, you're tightening up a home for performance, how that home breathes, the indoor air quality, the the cleanliness of it. Builders typically won't spend money on air cleaning systems and filtration. I think they'll have second thoughts now. I think the buyers will be more educated and actually pushing those builders. Have you got this level of a MERV filter or a heat recovery ventilator or an ERV? And the builder's going to have to get smarter and integrate those into their subsystems of the home. I think those are some of the top of the head that, you know, hit me with this.
All right, I need another volunteer so we don't have to call on you.
Just to touch on a few of the system integration pieces, before COVID, we had worked with a builder to develop a series already requiring a ton of pre-planning. And now we're rehabbing conversations to say, okay, well, we might have thought this was an office, but maybe this becomes an office in a bathroom, so that when somebody does become sick, this is where they go. And that when you're done, you can close it, sanitize it, and then everything else happens on the second and third level of the home. Or maybe there's a different user that says, I'm not so worried about sanitation, I'm worried about storage. Can this become storage for me? And how does that space function differently than if it was a bedroom bathroom combo? But the forethinking is already starting to happen in certain places on how we can get farther down the line of integrating and building before the user actually comes in and says, this is what I need and this is what I want.
You know, that brings to mind in the commercial retail space, the white box that's delivered. And I think Thomas referred to this, all rooms are basically similar dimensions. It's just how you outfit them. There's the adaptability issue of, instead of more rooms, different rooms, having just multiple uses. I made a list and I borrowed some of this from other posts, but the home is now a remote office, a virtual school, a restaurant, social center, playground, gym, sanctuary for me time, crash pad, package delivery center. I think Rebecca mentioned that. Indoor, outdoor living place. You know, there's a number of things that it's supposed to do now. So one of the senses I'm getting.
Medical room?
Medical room.
Medical room, yeah. You know, maybe it's the kitchen and breakfast nook convert to a classroom, you know, if needed, or your day office or something. But that's one thought. The other question I'd like to pose, just and for comment, is, are we doing a lot of work for a temporary situation that ultimately will blow over and we go back to somewhat more of a normal? And what's going to be the sustainable design pieces that you think are really going to come out of this with long-lasting impact?
Rodney, you've done it again. You've stumped people into silence.
He's got too many crazy people here to do that.
Okay, all right.
I think there's certainly a lot of components that will stay. I think that one of the things I said at the last panel was, if we don't come out of this as version 2.0, then we've missed an opportunity. And I think that we would be remiss not to ask the questions. I think every buyer demographic could potentially be different. I think that where people are moving from or moving to are different. I think people's lifestyle changes are going to be different. And so I definitely think that we will change. I think the livability and the flexibility of a home is going to change. Our structural options will be different. Our packages will be different. We will start having packages about, you know, things that are, I think Deana just said something about a light. I love that. I haven't heard of that, the UV light. I think that's amazing. And if you think of a vestibule in a house now that used to be a drop zone for throwing all your stuff, now is a spot where, you know, you've got a UV light that sanitizes things. I mean, even if we're not amid COVID, I've got 3 kids and 2 dogs. I need my house to be sanitized. So, you know, I think having something like that would be amazing, even not amid what we're going through, but having something like that would be so great as we navigate this and beyond.
Would you not even just want to sanitize your cell phone? We all need to do that every single day.
Yes.
I mean, that would just be,
Everything.
that's enough of a reason to do it. I'm just
Yes.
interrupting really quickly because it's 5 minutes to 4 and I pushed them back a little bit. They're going to regroup us at 4. I think the recollection of us should go smoother than the splitting apart of us did. But just in case anyone's mid-thought while we get time traveled to another room, just throwing it out there. Back to you, Rodney, and then we'll see when they pull the plug and move us back together.
All right, I see a lot of other places that haven't shared anything. Please do so now.
Yeah, this is Clarke Ellis. I'm a management consultant. Been working with home builders as well as others in the general construction space for a while. And one of the things that I keep hearing is we work with builders a lot. And even before the systems issues, Michael, I think is spot on talking about how we're going to see more industrial design, more sophisticated systems coming into the homes. We're already seeing challenges for homeowners to do basic maintenance on the existing mechanical systems and electrical systems that are in the houses. They've gotten more sophisticated, and homeowners have less time and tend to be less sophisticated in general today than they have been in the past at doing basic maintenance. So I think one of the implications, I think, for the builder particularly is, what role does the builder need to play in not just training the homeowner, but maybe also providing a more professional maintenance service as these systems, these homes become more technical, particularly as it relates to Michael talking about health. I think that's something not to overlook, and as builders, how you're designing it's part of the customer experience, but I think it's going to become more and more challenging and more important to be able to manage that.
Thanks, Chris. Clarke, excuse me.
Stacy?
Hi.
Jennifer.
I just had a quick question about how, everybody's talking about the upgrades and integration and choices and sophisticated systems. And I'm wondering how that plays into the affordability and attainability piece. I mean, particularly in single family homes. I mean, maybe multifamily, it might be more cost effective, but what happens to single family homes as we keep improving and changing?
That's a great question, Stacy. I think it comes down to digitally coordinating things and basically figuring out, what the SKUs are, what is the product, what is the kit of parts look like for this product.
Thomas, we lost your volume. There we go.
But I think it comes down to really figuring out what the product is and what it takes to deliver that product, and have levels, price point, catalogs of that product to be able to deliver it. And even when you have options, figure out what it takes to build those options integrated with the original product, and calculate the data, realistic data of how you executed that product, so you know realistic cost of it, and you do it over and over.
Okay, Thomas, your microphone faded out, but I think we got the gist of it.
Okay.
All right, come on, folks.
Well, I'll just add to a little bit of what he was trying to say, is that in order to get more things figured, to make it affordable, essentially, we had to get everybody on board really early on and have them agree and talk to each other about what the ultimate vision is, because if one person was off, it messed up the whole thing. So I completely agree with you that digital integration and that teamwork up front, rather than trying to figure it out in the field, it's a lot more expensive. And so we can figure it out and work through the kinks earlier. It's helping everybody. And that goes back to what Rebecca was saying initially, like, listen to what the consumer wants, because if you're wrong that early, like when you're trying to figure out all the details early on and you haven't asked the consumer what you want, then we got to start all over. So
Right.
Someone,
Rodney, Rodney,
who's that?
comment on your question earlier. I think the question we need to ask ourselves coming out of this.
Thomas, your
Okay.
volumes.
Thomas, would you mind typing it in chat so that we can get it? And then we'll try and.
I'll just.
Okay.
Rodney, I was just going to add, someone made the point of thinking of houses like cars, which, as many of you know, I love this analogy. But houses in the past, architects for the builder, every time they think they need a new product, they design a new floor plan. The problem with that is you can't really optimize it when you're just doing them at a whim. So I think you'll see more platforms. So many of you may not know, but if you just bought your last Hyundai or Audi or whatever, the platform of that car, probably it was 5, 6, 7 years old. They dressed up the design of it every couple of years. You thought you were getting a slightly new car. So I think you're going to see more houses that have these platforms of architecture that can live longer life because they've pre-designed where these service chases are in the floors and some vertical risers to actually allow more plug and play. The only way you can do that is pre-thinking, and like Deana just said, get all the players together, open architecture mentality, plug and play later, and get the manufacturers involved. No one is doing that today, but I think you're going to see, I'll be shocked if that isn't the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Michael, I've got to agree with you on that. You're right on. I think it's going to drive more innovation in offsite, and it requires that you bring all the participants in up front, and you're designing for manufacturing and assembly, and you'll generate efficiencies. Somebody, Rodney, asked, how are we going to extract the value? How are we going to continue? Is this going to continue in the future? And this is one of those things I believe will stay with us. We will innovate more in factories. There'll be more and more robotics going on, so there'll be less. We talk about the health effects. There'll be less density of people in those factories, and then when you assemble those houses on site, there's going to be less people assembling those houses. But it all requires collaborating more and upfront design work. But I think this is going to help. This is going to help that whole process, and I believe it'll stick.
So a question for the group based on what Scott said. How does the small builder, and the small builder could be a regional builder doing 1,000 units a year, but Pulte and Lennar can leverage those resources and certainly have an economy of scale to recapture it. If you're a smaller builder, is it harder for you to include all those trade partners and stakeholders?
I think it actually might be easier. If you remember one of the Alliance events 2 or 3 years ago, the McCall Holmes guys, Brad was on there, and I think with Tim, and they showed how they designed their platform homes, and they had their own panelization plant on the community. They had some like a 5 or 8 year build out of their community. They were a family driven builder, doing 200 or 300 homes a year. I bet they got the right people in the room a lot easier sometimes than the medium to big groups.
And
yeah, we build. Oh,
go ahead.
We done.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello. Hello.
I told you that might be quick and abrupt. We're all having fun learning how to use technology in a different way, right? So thanks for your patience in this. We had a good conversation on the design side. I'm sure there was probably a good conversation over in labor and in industrialized construction. So we've got about 25 minutes left technically of this session. So would love to get from each of our room leaders, the top of mind thoughts that they pulled from the sessions they were running. And then I'm going to open the floor to any other comments anyone's got on any of the subjects that we discussed in that last breakout. So Rodney, if you could take us away on the design front.
Of course, now I'm trying to recap all the answers. You know, our question was focused on the health, wellness, well-being, and design, and especially over the next 18 months as a result of, you know, the situation we're in now. And one of the questions was whether the discussions we're having now will have long-term impact, or is it something we're doing just for the short term? The consensus opinion was, no, it does make a big difference. The origination of bathrooms years ago was a result of, you know, pandemics that were occurring then. And the acknowledgement that you still want to have contaminated shoes and products dropped at the door. So the discussion recaps some of what Rebecca talked about with thinking about how space is used in the house and drop zones, places where you can, you know, shed whatever you need, get packages delivered without worrying about contamination. All of those will still apply even when there's not a pandemic. The other thing that stood out was adaptability. At the end of the day, you know, the homes in a house are spaces. There's 3 or 4 walls depending on the design. So space is space, not unlike a white box in commercial retail. The question is, how do you outfit it? And can you design it and outfit it with multiple uses so that the kitchen and dining area or breakfast nook become also a schoolroom or a home office, you know, as an alternate home office in addition to the one that you originally built in the house. So what this has done is forced everybody to look at, instead of designing singular use spaces, designing them that where they can be adapted in a lot of ways. The discussion also focused on clean air quality and just managing the health inside the house. One of the examples was vitamin D from sunlight kills germs. So Lewis, one of the architects in our group, mentioned how they've gone back to larger windows versus small ones to save money. I mean, going to larger windows that cost a little bit more, but it provides far more light in, and the light becomes a decontaminant in its own right. Michael Dickens talked about the integration of mechanical systems into the design so that not only do they work, but that the homeowner who's going to be servicing it later knows how to work with it, knows what they need to do to maintain it, and maybe perhaps the builder gets a ancillary type service business where they handle that for the customer, since they are getting a lot more technical and complicated. Let's see, I don't know if any of the other panels on it, Betsy, you were sitting in, did I miss anything on that?
I don't think that you did. I actually was jumping in and out to get us all regrouped. So I did record our session too. We'll see if anything comes out. If anyone was in the design section thinks that we missed anything, feel free to chime in and let us know what we missed. Oh, you thought of something.
I think one of the points we talked about was open architecture. So the floor plans of the builder will stay longer, might be a 5 or 8 year lifetime. But because they brought the designers, the manufacturer partners in earlier, they're looking for where the chases are or the distribution path for things like the airlines, the electrics, the plumbing. And then you've got ability to have flexibility in the floor plan, more like plug and play then, when you're either adapting the spaces or the subsystems. And as we talked about, that opens up to more opportunity for factory assembly, robotization of the components. So the builder putting a lot more thought than he does today into the floor plans.
Okay, cool. We'll move to labor next. I want to make sure that we get to each of the sections. Maybe this will be a nice 10 minutes on each. Once we get to 4:30, if we're out of time for any other comments, remember we do have the chat rooms. We have a chat room for each of these think tanks. If you have comments, questions, ideas, things you're doing we should look at, things we should go seek out, go into the chat room and let us know there. And we'll certainly follow up on all of that stuff. But in the meantime, I'm going to turn the floor over to Breck on the labor front. What came out of your session? You need to unmute yourself, man.
Thank you for catching that early. Yeah, I have a lot of notes from the our labor discussion. It really boiled down to a couple of things that I'll dive into on my notes. But first and foremost, not losing talent and refilling the pool. We chatted a lot about, Leisure brought up, them at the Brewer companies. They've changed a lot of their marketing to invest in social media marketing and into their academy to actually attract the next generation. Carlos was talking about how, interesting enough, they're partnering with phone companies and assisting maybe some less sophisticated trades to actually get devices in their hand. It might not be a new iPhone, but it could be an iPhone 8 to help bridge that gap for them to keep up with the technology and the trends for things to become more streamlined between builder, subs, labor. And another one is we talked a lot about, the rising costs of college. I mean, we're going to have to see a very big campaign push from partners such as policymakers, funding, and big associations all getting behind a similar message to drive that, construction is an actual viable career path versus just a secondary career. And I think there's an argument to be made of all of us were chatting, because there's a lot of talk around, anti-college, you can go into the trades, make more money. And maybe we should start campaigning of, you can actually have an equally successful career as if you were to go in college or if you were to choose the trades. And so by not putting this whole anti-college as a campaign and focusing on how we can actually empower people with a different path, not a lesser path. So those were some of the learning lessons that we had. And then also, what can we do to fill the skills gap? I mean, we got 41% of our industry retiring over the next 10 years. And we actually have to empower the next generation to use digital tools so that we can bridge the gap and, seed technology and innovation. And I think it's really going to come down to the leaders and the owners of these businesses to actually provide a helping hand to the next generation so that they can streamline this process versus doing it the way that we've always done it. If anyone from our group wants to add based on any of the notes that I have, feel free to share too, please.
You did that so succinctly. Well, did you share in your group, just take a minute, did you share in your group some of the things that you've been hearing? Because you do have the largest community of people on the, in the actual building side. So the kinds of attitudes and feedback and things that you've been hearing recently from your community, I think would be enlightening to the group if you can share anything on that front.
Yeah, so we've been talking to a lot of trade schools lately and some professors. It's actually pretty interesting to see how optimistic these trade students actually are given the current epidemic. I mean, one of the biggest fears that, we've chatted about is making sure that, if we go into a recession and a downturn, it's not going to be the result like the last one, right? That's the biggest thing that we're trying to optimize for, is not having the majority of labor going to retail and business hospitality. And how can we show them that there's an essential career here? Now, from the people that we've been chatting with, digital tools are absolutely the best way to engage the next generation. They hang out on social media all day. I mean, the guys over at the Brewer companies, they've pivoted into reinvesting into those marketing strategies. And they've said, we're getting hundreds of applications. And we're seeing this with so much is we have to change the narrative of construction and the perception around it. I mean, the whole perception of construction is absolutely changing. And so meeting these people where they're at, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, wherever it is, I really think is going to be an incredible way to attract them, but also to nurture them. The massive opportunity that we have in this digital world is to constantly push our message every single day. That's the benefit to all of this. And it's to actually own our marketing. So instead of like outsourcing everything that you do as a company, you can actually bring it in-house, build a culture, and change that narrative for people to actually see it as a career. So that's a lot of the conversations that I've been having. A lot of builders are focused on culture and how they represent themselves online, because a lot of the applications that they get, it's not necessarily from a family or a friend. They're coming from social media, and people are having so much more access to research, just how consumers are more educated in the home buying experience. It's the same exact way that we're going with the trades. I mean, for our perspective as Hammer, to keep these kids engaged, they're engaging on our platform every single day. And it's helping them through the social distancing and realizing that construction maybe isn't as hyper local as it always been.
There's a comment on here from Ray Antonino, apologies, who says he hears the More You Know campaign going on, like what you'd see on NBC on a Saturday morning, which I think is a great idea. It's a huge marketing and a huge perception issue, and it shouldn't be at this point. It shouldn't be anti-college. Maybe at this point it should be anti-debt. You know, what's the debt ratio of going to college versus being in the trades, and how you can make a different life for yourself in that perspective. So might be an opportunity for us to look at that more there. Also got a comment from Rodney. I just love your thing is Rod Hall. As Rick Dalton told him, everyone he knows who owns a plane or a yacht was a subcontractor. That's a pretty good one. And then Katie said, I also think the narrative needs to be changed for the parents who tend to push kids into college. That's an awesome point. They need that switch flipped as well. So great point. Well, we're at 4:18. I want to make sure that we get the same amount of time to get some highlights from the industrialized construction section. So Diana Fissler, if you can share some of the highlights, and then if anyone from your crew wants to chime in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked quite a bit about, barriers and opportunities, and Pulte and some other big builders are largely panelized at this point, which is very exciting for me to hear. A key theme was consolidation of the building process from beginning to end, ending the fragmentation that has historically been true. We touched really briefly on materials, which are my special love, so I'm going to mention it anyway. That there's an opportunity for more multifunctional materials as the process gets more efficient with more industrialized construction. A number of people commented on and had strong opinions on us needing to move from a traditional construction mindset to a manufacturing mindset with things like, improvement of process, lean manufacturing. We've got to bring the best practices from traditional and advanced manufacturing into the construction process, the panelization process. When we talked about barriers, over and over again, it sounded like jurisdictions, regulators, inspectors are one of the biggest barriers to increased panelization. And the reasons for that have to do with fear of change and lack of control. Their entire business is built around being able to control things and monitor things and reduce risk. And so that's possibly an opportunity for more education. It was felt that that panelization really does make sense economically, and there's information out there, there's data, there's models, there's calculations that can be drawn upon for anyone who's reluctant to take the step. And of course, it makes more sense the more you can standardize, and also the higher volume builder you are. We touched on, the current COVID situation and safety in general, and believe that factory building has to be safer for workers, but there are still implications when people gather in a workplace, and so that situation has to be monitored very carefully. I think some people touched on automation, but I didn't capture too much there. So if one of the room members wants to comment on that, I would sure appreciate it. And that's what I've got.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the comment regarding automation is that, it's important that the manufacturers, the CMs, the pro dealers, invest in automation so that, components can be manufactured cost effectively to, deliver the total value. And so we discussed the fact that sometimes is a barrier because of the lack of stick-to-itiveness with regards to builders staying with panels. Especially in a down cycle when labor becomes free, sometimes a builder will be tempted to shift back to a stick frame solution.
Okay, there were a couple other comments in here. Are you doing anything special to help support your trade partners during this time? Examples could be early payment to best, most loyal trades, or helping them helping them complete applications for stimulus programs, which is no easy feat. Anyone doing anything along those lines? Take that as a no for now. If there's, there we go.
I'll make a comment. I do know there is some assistance going with regards to stimulus money. So, some builders are very engaged in that. And I don't think we have anyone from Lennar in this section, but, Lennar has been very proactive on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another thing, can't sure what that was related to, George. You said, I think that's correct, but a lot of stuff has gone in there. Focus on entrepreneur. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was responding to Rodney's thought, or I guess it was actually Dennis's thought, that we live in an entrepreneurial economy. The message of self-employment and quality of life for trades should be reinforced. And I think that's right. That, I can remember 15 years ago watching the trade schools in Phoenix. The kids coming out of there always had jobs. And the woman who ran the program actually had a program she set up with ASU, where after a couple of years on the job, they could go back and get a crash course in the business side. And so they were prepped up already. They've done their apprenticeship, and now they were starting their own business. And I think that model is a great model to follow, that you really are into this entrepreneurial, I am in control of my own destiny, I'm going to build my own wealth kind of business.
Okay, thank you. Not sure if we have any other comments here. If anyone else wants to jump in, going to take a check for a moment in the chat window and see if there's anything else in here that's come in. Nope. It's 4:24. We're going to end this session at 4:30. We have one more session. If you can bear with us and come back, we just want to share with you at 4:45 where the Alliance is headed, some of the things that are going to be coming out from us soon, as well as just kind of any recap thoughts, anything anyone wants to share, anything they want to see us talk about in the future, any discussions that we started today that you want to extend. For those of you who've been to our live events, we're going to get some deep thoughts from George Casey during that session, his takeaways from the day, which is always quite interesting. But if you want to join us back at 4:45, just click on the agenda. We'll get back together and it'll be a quick half hour. If we don't see you, thank you all for joining us today. This was great. Great to have so many different people, different perspectives involved. We did record all of the sessions. We will share as many of the slides as we can. Some will be taken out for competitive reasons out of a couple of the presentations, but for the most part, for those who presented, we'll be sharing those slides. If they're not posted already, the videos will be posted. And we also are going to convert a lot of this stuff into notes for you. And some of the sessions that you saw today, we've got other components going on in the next couple of months in terms of content coming out that we'll talk about at 4:45. But thank you again so much, and we'll see you back online shortly for the last little get together. Before we all go, bring out a cocktail, at least if you're on the East Coast. All right, we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you.